So with that, I get the honor and privilege of welcoming our keynote speaker for the evening, Hoang. Well, I have to talk about it first. France is co-founder and CEO of Boodle AI. He is both a veteran and a serial entrepreneur, having funded companies that have generated over $600 million in combined sales and employed over 1,200 professionals across fields of AI, law, aerospace, defense, and government services. He's a proud U.S. Army veteran and a graduate of the U.S. Military Academy at West Point. He was also one of the highest rated speakers for our inaugural Entrepreneurship Bootcamp for Veterans that was hosted this past August. And for those of you who are not familiar with that, that is a partnership with Syracuse University. We have some of our alum in the room, I see. Dare I make them stand? I should. Let's have them stand, our veterans. That's what you get for being in my line of sight. So with that, it is my honor and privilege to welcome France to the stand.
Well, good evening, everyone. It is an absolute pleasure to be in a room of fellow innovators and educators and entrepreneurs. When I spoke, I was invited by Larry to come and speak tonight. I asked, well, what should I speak about? He goes, so talk about your story. Talk about how you're a successful entrepreneur and all these things you've done. Well, frankly, I'm going to talk about something I know a lot better. I'm going to talk about how to live a life of fear and failure. Because that's what it actually means to be an entrepreneur, right? Like, let's be honest, anybody here who's an entrepreneur kind of wakes up every night in a cold sweat wondering, am I going to make it to tomorrow? There's my favorite term of being an entrepreneur is WIFIO. WIFIO stands for we're fucked, it's over. That is what it means to be an entrepreneur. So what people, when they look at my resume or they look at somebody else's successful resume, they think that it's like a perfect puzzle, right? There's all the answers are right, there's no mistakes, the paper is perfect, particularly in the era of social media and Instagram and LinkedIn. This is what people see. The reality is there are no overnight successes, right? Every overnight success is years in the making. And the reality is we're all torn puzzles. We're all incomplete. We have wrong answers. We have erasures and crossouts. And there's pieces of the paper that are torn and are never going to be fixed. They're never going to go back to the way they were. So I'm going to talk about the things I've learned in my life, which has been really a masterclass in fear and failure. So what am I going to talk about? I'm going to talk about how fear taught me hope. I'm going to talk about how failure taught me faith. Okay, first, Act 1. Where did I come from? How did I become afraid? 5 fears that shaped me. First, this is a very challenging clicker, by the way. I feel like I'm on Jeopardy. An immigrant's fear. So I was born in Vietnam, 1973, tail end of the Vietnam War. My father was a South Vietnamese Army officer. My mother worked for the U.S. Naval Attaché. April 23rd, 1975, we board an Air Force C-141 Starlifter, lift off in the skies above Saigon, fly to a Navy base, a resettlement camp. From there, get flown to the United States, arrive on the shores of the U.S., live. First place I ever lived was in a Marine Corps tent. That's the photo on the right, that's Camp Pendleton. From there, went to an Army National Guard base in Washington State where I ended up growing up. So it literally took every branch of the U.S. Armed Forces to get me and my family here to the United States. And I grew up an immigrant. And like many immigrants, one of my earliest memories and one of my fears I just constantly grew up with was always wondering if I belonged. And so, just that feeling of always being an outsider. And you don't have to be an immigrant to have that fear. I think we all feel that fear. But it shaped me wanting to belong, wanting to be a piece of something bigger than myself. Then, inspired by learning about Vietnam and the service of the soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, I went to West Point. I wanted to serve. I wanted to give back in the same way that I was served. And ended up serving in the Army, not once, but twice. Bosnia as a peacekeeper, Afghanistan with U.S. Army Special Forces. And for those of you who have served in something bigger than yourselves, particularly where you serve in something like the Army, which is an interesting institution, all the military institutions, right? You live in an institution where you don't have to like the person you're willing to die for, which is just really, we need more of that in today's world. But then you live this constant fear, am I going to fail my fellow soldier? That's what motivated me as an officer, as a soldier, and it was my constant fear that I was gonna let down the people who were depending on me. I later became a lawyer, not a very good lawyer, but I still ended up working in the White House for this man. I was an associate White House counsel for President Bush and his administration, and literally every day was asked to do something I didn't know how to do, and it was for the President of the United States. Absolutely terrifying, right? And so really, I literally lived in the fear of like, will the mistakes I make affect lives and livelihoods? And there was a couple lawyers, Mr. Sparks spoke earlier. It's a sacred trust you have when somebody entrusts you as a lawyer. They're either having the best day of their life, or more generally speaking, they're having the worst day of their life when they come and talk to a lawyer. And it's a huge burden on you. And so when you're working at a place like the White House, that kind of takes up to spinal tap 11 in terms of seriousness. And then I became an entrepreneur because obviously I have a high tolerance for risk. And I will tell you, you think that like at some point you're going to feel confident being an entrepreneur, whether it's you finally get to $1 million or you sell a company, or even for me, like last week I announced this partnership with the second most valuable company in the world, Microsoft. You still wonder every single day, and thank you. You still wonder every day, am I an imposter? Did I just get lucky? Is tomorrow the day that I fail and everybody finds out that, that wasn't real to begin with? And that fear shapes you, and it's always kind of gnawing their back at you. And then I have a family, and when you become a husband, when you become a father, it introduces a whole nother set of fears. And for all of us here who have children, right? Am I good enough spouse? Am I good enough parent? Will I be able to provide? Am I setting the right example? And so, that's probably the ultimate fear we live with, right? Is to not to live up to the expectations we have of ourselves. So my kids this past Christmas got this, my wife is here, and I can't remember, maybe she can help me remember the name of it. There's this like plastic tubby thing, and you put ingredients on it, and it lights up, and it becomes something else, and the kids loved it, right? And it was Alchemy, right? And I love the word alchemy because it means turning something into another thing. And so I love to talk about the alchemy of fear, right? That you can turn terror into treasure. So first, fear enables hope. So how does it do that? It does that. Boy, if I was on Jeopardy, I'd totally be losing it. Okay. First, you can't have hope without something to lose, right? If you're very comfortable and you're not afraid of anything, then there's never any reason to try to hope. So fear enables hope. And that equation is you have to fear staying in place more than you have to fear moving. And so that gives you the opportunity to hope for something better. And then ultimately, you have a choice. And when you choose possibility when the probability says to quit, that's the equation for hope. And so hope this is one of my favorite definitions of hope. It's rebellion in the face of fear. So a few years back, some of you all remember Kabul fell. There was this rush. I think there were some people in this room that were involved in this, in helping our Afghan allies. I was involved in a couple of organizations that helped several hundred Afghans get out. And I will tell you, it was so inspiring to work with these Afghans. They just gave me a perspective. There was parents who were standing outside of a gate for 12 hours, 18 hours with their young children, waiting for a moment to try to get in and start a new life. And there was Americans who stepped in where our government couldn't and spent their life savings. They lost jobs. They gave up everything to try to help these people start a new life because they're our allies. And so I saw so much hope. And there's this wonderful saying at West Point that part of the duty of a West Point graduate is to be hope when hope becomes forlorn. I just love that saying. So faith is intricately located next to hope because faith emerges from failure. Faith begins when data ends, right? When you don't have any reason to hope anymore, then hope isn't enough. You've got to exercise faith. And so, and faith isn't optimism. So optimism is things are going to get better. But what if they don't? Optimism is believing things will get better. Faith is believing that you can endure no matter how bad things get. One of my favorite books is Man's Search for Meaning. Some of you probably have read it. And in that book, the author talks about how in the concentration camps, some of the people who are in prison, right, they would say, well, tomorrow I'm going to get released, or tomorrow's going to be better. And when they didn't, they lost their optimism, and they literally just crumpled up and died. But then there was folks who had faith. They found faith in something else, whether it was a desire to see their loved ones, or a desire to publish, in one case, publish a paper, and that faith helped them continue through. So grit, right, is the scar tissue of fear. That's my definition of grit. So what happens is, so I went to Army Ranger School. It sucks, okay? Army Ranger School is 67 days of basically, I'm tired, I'm hungry, I want to quit, but I don't. Every single day, over and over again. So for those of you who don't know, it's one of the toughest military trainings. It's got about a 40% pass rate. You literally get one meal a day. You average 3 hours of sleep a night. There are long stretches where you don't sleep at all. There's one stretch where I didn't sleep for 78 hours. I was hallucinating so bad, I was putting quarters into trees thinking they were vending machines, okay? And there's a term in Army Ranger School, embrace the suck. And what they're saying is, just embrace it. It's gonna suck. And so fear and pain are temporary, they say. Quitting is forever. And what they're trying to teach you in Ranger School is if you can suck it up just a little bit, then you get used to sucking it up, right? And every time you face your fear and you make it through, okay, I know that I can get through that. And that means when something hard comes in the future, I can get through that as well. And so it got to the point where we joke, when we're in combat, when things are bad, people who are in Ranger School would say, well, at least we're not in Ranger School. Like literally, it's how bad Ranger School is, okay? One of my favorite terms is anti-fragility. So I love this concept. If you drop something and it breaks, it's fragile. But there are things you can drop and they don't change at all. They don't break, but they don't change. Those are resilient things. But there's this idea of things that are anti-fragile. And things that are anti-fragile, the more they break and they heal, the stronger they get. So think muscles, right? Think small children, think our immune system. And so when you stress them out, that's how they actually get stronger. People, we are supposed to be anti-fragile. We need difficulties, we need pain, we need suffering, unfortunately, right? Because that stress is what makes us stronger. We are anti-fragile creatures. There's a saying in the military, that which doesn't kill us makes us stronger. And there's a great example of this. So this is an example of an art form called kintsugi. It's a Japanese art form. You find it in China as well. When they break a bowl in China or Japan, they don't throw it away, they repair it. And they repair it in a way that makes the bowl stronger and more beautiful. And so it's considered, these pieces of art are actually considered more desirable than something that's perfect. And so your scars are proof that you're stronger than what tried to break you. And so courage, right, is the ultimate expression of all this. I love this description. Courage is fear's dancing partner. It isn't the absence of fear, it's fear holding a compass, showing you where you need to go. It's built in those small acts. I had a mentor who's a judge, and he was an Army Ranger. He served in Vietnam. He had a Valor Award. And he told me something that just sticks to me to this day. He goes, France, physical courage is easy. You're on the battlefield, you're full of adrenaline, something's bad happening, you don't have time to think, and so you do something that's probably really, really stupid, and you live to tell the tale. And that's fine. But you know what's more important than physical valor? Moral courage. Moral courage is what makes society better, and the problem with moral courage is it's not in the heat of the moment. It isn't like you have to rush into something. It's generally a decision you make when you have a lot of time to think about it. No one else is going to know about it. You have to do the right thing. You're probably going to suffer for it. And that's what makes it hard. And that's why he said moral courage is more important to society than physical courage. And so one of the ways you can develop courage is just admitting your fear, right? There is a desire to present this great, brave face. I'm a big fan of talking openly about failure and talking openly about fear, because it gives you permission to talk about it more. It gives the people around you permission to talk about it. In today's age of social media and trying to be perfect, we need more permission to actually just be ourselves. So courage is persevering despite fear. So we have a daily practice, right? We gotta find those gifts in the wreckage and the beauty in the breaks. I think that's our challenge, make this a daily habit. So the ultimate payoff of this is this, right? We have fewer regrets over life. That's the ultimate ROI. We regret mostly the things we don't do versus the things we do. There's something I call the rocking chair test. Jeff Bezos calls this the regret minimization principle. The idea is when you're 98 years old and you're sitting in your rocking chair and you can't really start anything new, how can you have a life that you have the fewest number of regrets? And you're going to probably regret the things you didn't try more than the things you did. And so live a life such that when you're 98, and you're sitting in that rocking chair, you have the fewest number of regrets. That's the rocking chair test. Okay, let me bring this home. The failure resume. I think all of us should have a failure resume. This is my failure resume. It's actually real. You can't read it, but it's real. It's actually a resume of all the things that I've done and failed at, right? All the things that I tried and didn't go well. All the bad grades, all the businesses, all the bright ideas I had, all the mistakes I made in my personal relationships. And I actually keep this and I reflect on it, because this is the price you pay for a life well lived. And so the twist, of course, is that your catastrophes are actually your true credential, right? And that every failure is a step closer to success. For those of you who have fundraised as an entrepreneur, I just finished closing a seed round of several $1 million. I had to talk to 140 venture capital funds to raise that fund. 99% of the people I talked to told me no. It was a horrible experience. But when other people tell me like, hey, what's the secret to raising money? I tell people you have to collect a lot of no's. Every no, I talked to somebody and they said, well, I've talked to 20 funders and they told me no. It's like, that's a good start, keep going. You've got to collect a lot of no's. And that goes for anything worthwhile in life. So here's my encouragement for you, my call to adventure. Live a hold my beer life, right? Collect fears, curate your failures, live your life with fewer regrets, right? In that moment where you decide, should I do this or not? Live a life where you hand somebody your beer and say, hold this, watch this, see what happens. If nothing else, you have some good stories to tell if you're ever a keynote speaker at a Spark the Springs event. So the torn puzzle is the point, right? That's obviously where I'm going to close this up with. That's where you want to end up. You want to be like that torn crossword puzzles with as many mistakes and as many erasures and torn pieces as possible. Because that's the proof of persistence, right? That's a life well lived. And so the opposite of fear isn't fearlessness, it's faith, it's grit, it's courage. And I encourage you to go ahead and be that imperfect torn puzzle. And I really appreciate the time to be able to speak to you tonight. Thank you.